So if your ear is broken down, you have to have another way of getting to those bones, right? So that's where bone conduction comes in. Bone conduction tries to vibrate basically this area around those bones, so that way it can still vibrate the little bones inside your ear, and then takes that then the rest of the way through the cochlea, through the auditory nerve, and then to your brain.
All right, Dr. Castro. Let's talk about the next topic here, which is around direct signal pathways for audio. It is a very loaded topic, but let's try to condense it down where this concept of direct signal, and what does that mean for audio?
I don't know if it's as much as loaded as much as sure. Let's see here. How does somebody think of as a direct signal pathway to begin with? I guess it's like first step is wireless versus cabled. That might be step one, which is if I'm hearing somebody from far away, that there's a potential for loss of information, right? So like if, for example, if your mom's calling to you and you're downstairs, she's upstairs or whatever, it's gonna be hard to hear. The waves are bouncing off the walls, there's so many loss of transmission. And I think that's the moral of the story here is how can you reduce the amount of loss of transmission over time? Think about a PA at a sports venue. The PA is blasting every direction at once, and everyone is also yelling back in at the same time. So there's a lot of like breaking down when the wave comes and fights the wave that everyone else is pushing back in. So there's a loss of transmission. When there's a PA in a store and they're trying to say, hey, clean up an aisle, whatever, that's fighting against music, against people talking, the carts and other actions happening, loss of transmission. So the question is, how do you get a more direct or more consistent or clean method of transmission from point A to point B, which is sender and receiver. Again, and then that's where the Wi-Fi versus Ethernet conversation comes in. You have Wi-Fi almost everywhere, but sometimes it can be spotty. If you need a sure connection, you plug in with that little Ethernet jack, and that's how you can get a direct signal transmission. So start there.
That's a good starting point.
Yeah.
But let's spin it back into audio. So
Sure.
I mean, you gave a good example of like PA pushing in.
Yeah.
So, for example, I mean, I've heard of things like bone conduction, right? Bone conduction centralizes direct signal because it's literally direct.
I was even one step before that. I mean, just imagine somebody yelling at you versus like putting in headphones.
Okay, headphones.
And then that would be a way that you can plug in and then play back something directly to your ears. And so that would be the most direct method of getting sound into your ears versus a PA or something loud or a loudspeaker or something like that.
Got it.
Yeah. And then next step beneath that, but what if your ears don't necessarily work?
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
So then then you're basically capping off the way of the way it gets into you, the person, right? And what do we mean by you, the person, right? You have to understand the mechanisms of how your body interprets sound. And so your ears help funnel it into your eardrum. Your eardrum then transduces basically that sound information into these focused vibrations that go along your ear bones, little tiny bones you have in your ear, and those eventually yield into your cochlea, and then eventually to a nerve that then goes to your brain, right? But let's say any one of those things breaks down, starting at the ear. So if your ear is broken down, you have to have another way of getting to those bones, right? So that's where bone conduction comes in. Bone conduction tries to vibrate basically this area around those bones, so that way it can still vibrate the little bones inside your ear, and then takes that then the rest of the way through the cochlea, through the auditory nerve, and then to your brain. But let's say your bones don't work. That's an actual thing. And a lot of kids back in I want to say like the 70s or something like that, there was an epidemic of meningitis, and that would cause the bones, I believe, to not function the way that they're supposed to. Either they concrete or they're cemented, something like that. They don't vibrate anymore. So then they had to have another way of trying to go to the auditory nerve. So then they had cochlear implants. Cochlear implants were implanted, not just in the bone. So not only was bone conduction not going to work, but you had to find a way to get to the nerve in the most natural way. Some tried to go directly to the auditory nerve, but it was too direct. So there's such a thing as too direct. But in fact, if you kind of emulate the signal that the cochlea naturally picks up, it'll sound a little bit more natural because it's still, the cochlea is receiving the signal in a way that it was kind of anticipating. So that was kind of the happy medium. There's too direct, which also includes brainstem implants for people whose cochlea is also broken and they have no way to be able to use a cochlear implant. You can go one step further and have a brain implant that goes basically directly to the nerve. But that, at least from some reports, they say it's a little two-dimensional. And so it doesn't sound like a 3D space. So if something in the cochlea has a way to be able to enhance the signal coming into it to give it 3D space. And so that's where cochlear implants are. And but that's not as realistic as perhaps bone conduction is. And of course, having the whole hearing system work from beginning to end, that's where earbuds are ideal. Back to fourth.
Got it.
Directness.
And then depending on which that delivery mechanism is also how much auditory information is available, right? Because even from headphones, there's a limitation of lows. It can go pretty high, but like the lows kind of get cut off. Bone conduction, same thing. There's a certain frequency range that it can hit, right? Like, don't they all have? Yeah. Even from direct signal, you still gotta also look at what is the range that you can actually access.
Yeah. The closer you get to being more direct, you're sacrificing some of the natural mechanism of how your hearing works, so that you're getting less and less information, even though you're getting it more and more direct to the brainstem. That's right.
Got it. Awesome. Appreciate you breaking down how do we get directly to our brain with audio information.